Hello everyone, I'm Cindy Winget, the author of The Apparition, and welcome to my channel. So in today's video, we're going to be doing my Christmas recommendations. So I believe I have about 14 books to share with you, and we're going to start out with all things light and fluffy with some holiday romances, and then we'll get into some thrillers and some horror. So first I want to talk about B.K. Borison. So she came out with one called Love Light Farms, and this is actually part of a trilogy. This is the first one, and I believe there's 2 other ones. But we have this girl who loves this tree farm, and I think she owns it actually, and she gets in touch with this Instagram influencer, and she wants her help to save this tree farm that's going to go bankrupt. And in the application, she wanted it to sound idyllic and like a perfect romantic getaway for the holidays, and so she claimed that she owned this farm with her boyfriend. But then the Instagram influencer is going to come to town to see the tree farm, and she's like, oh crap, I don't really have a boyfriend. And so her best friend walks in and she enlists him to pretend to be her boyfriend. And then this year she came out with a new one called Good Spirits. I just barely got this one, and it actually ended up being a pick for the Book of the Month Club, but I didn't know that and I'd already bought it, so oh well. At least this one has these really beautiful sprayed edges. So this is about this man who is actually a Christmas ghost, and he gets into contact with his client, which is her, to help her, kind of like Scrooge in the Christmas Carol. But in her case, she's not a bad person, and so he's wondering why he's helping her, because she's not like all of his other clients. But come to find out that it's because she needs help standing up for herself, and he's there to help her with that. So I'm planning on reading this one this year myself. And then we have a couple by Emily Stone. The first one is called Love Holly, and this is about a woman who started this program where lonely people at Christmas time can write letters to each other just to give them a little bit of Christmas cheer, and normally nobody writes back, and that's expected. They're lonely and sad and whatever, and it's not really meant to be a pen pal thing necessarily. It's just meant to give them some cheering up during the holidays. But in this case, she gets this letter from this woman named Emma, and she apparently has a similar tragic, depressing story to what Holly's going through. And so Holly wants to help her in particular, and she's trying to get into contact with her grandson and mend their relationship. And so she decides to track down the grandson and get them to reconcile. And when she meets up with him, she actually realizes that she has met him before, and she liked him the first time that she met him, but then lost contact. And then we have One Last Gift, and we have these brother and sisters who lost their parents, and so they've been reliant on each other for most of their lives. And then as a grown-up, she ends up losing her brother as well. But before he died, he apparently does like a scavenger hunt every year, and she finds the first clue, and so she decides to follow the clues to where they lead. And the love interest is actually their mutual friend named Sam, and he's kind of been distancing himself, probably because he's grieving too. But I'm guessing that the scavenger hunt has something to do with bringing them together. If you can't tell, I haven't read this one. And then we have In a Holidays by Christina Lauren. And this is about this woman who goes to a cabin in Utah every single year for Christmas with another couple of family friends. And I love that it takes place in Utah because that's where I live. And anyways, so she's leaving this cabin for the last time. They're not going to be doing that tradition anymore, and she's really sad about it. And so she kind of calls out to the universe, tell me how to be happy happy. And she gets her wish. And this turns into a groundhog type plot where she wakes up and discovers she's on a plane after getting into a car accident. And the plane is taking her back to Utah, back to the cabin. And then, she has to relive that moment over and over again. And she wakes up on the plane. And then she goes to the cabin and something happens. And she wakes up on the plane. And, and that's where the Groundhog Day starts to come in. And then we have One Day in December by Josie Silver. And this is about a woman who is on a train and she meets this man and she's convinced that it's the love of her life. And I'm not sure they even speak. I think they just look out the window and gaze into each other's eyes. I don't know. I haven't read it yet. But anyways, she's convinced that this is the one. And so she goes on a mission to find him and can't find him, almost gives up hope, and then goes to a Christmas party. And her best friend is there with her new boyfriend, which just happens to be this man that she is distantly in love with. And this reminds me of this old movie that came out in like the late 90s or early 2000s. It had Lance Bass as the male main character from NSYNC, and he meets a girl on the train, and then I think he had like a radio show or something, and he says, I met this girl, if anybody can help me find her, I'd be really grateful or whatever. But it sounds a lot like that, and I happen to enjoy that movie, so I'm hoping that I get the same vibes from this book. Pretty chunky though. It's like, I think it's only like 400 pages and the font's pretty big, but it makes it look like it's ginormous. And then we have A Home for the Holidays by Taylor Hahn. I just got this in Book of the Month, I think a month or two ago, so I haven't read this one either. But this is about a woman who loses her mother during the holidays and she's really upset, obviously. But this woman shows up on her doorstep who claims to be her mother's best friend, even though she's never heard of her, and she starts to give her stories about her mother that she's never heard of. Like she was going to be a famous country singer at one time. And so she is kind of enthralled by learning more about her mom, and she ends up going home for the holidays with this woman where she meets her son who is going through a divorce and sparks fly. So I think this is going to have a little bit of romance, but I think it's mostly going to be like a story about grief and mother-daughter relationships and stuff like that. Okay, so that's all of the holiday romances that I have for you. The next one I'm going to talk about is called Sally's Lament, and this is like the second or third book that features Sally, because I think this one's a standalone, but there's like another duology that also has to do with Sally Skellington. But so this is the story of if Sally had been the one to discover Christmas Town instead of Jack, how would it have gone? So I haven't read this one, but I love the cover. I love Sally. I love Nightmare Before Christmas. So I'm looking forward to reading this one soon. I don't know for sure if I'll get to it this year, but maybe. And then we have The Gathering by C.J. Tudor. And this is a vampire tale. And as you can tell from the cover, it has all the wintry, snowy vibes. This does have Christmas in it a little bit, just like a smidge. It's not really about Christmas or the holidays, but it is mentioned and it is a very snowy read. So I think it's perfect this season if you want to dive into a wintry horror during the Christmas time. So as I was saying, this is about vampires, and these vampires are known to people. They're not like out in the forest or out in the shadows. Sorry about the airplanes. I swear there's always airplanes flying above my head when I'm trying to record. So I apologize for that. But anyways, so they are known to people, but people are afraid of them and they don't like them and they're kind of against them mixing with, a normal company or whatever. And so this takes place in Alaska, and the vampires have kind of been shoved into the forest in Alaska where they're supposed to just stay to themselves, But our main character, she's a detective, and she comes to town to explore this death that people believe was done by a vampire to this young boy, but she's not really sure, so she wants to investigate to make sure if it's vampires or not before, a manhunt comes and a war happens between humans and vampires. But I really enjoyed this one a lot. I thought it was really good. I thought it was a really unique for a vampire tale, very modern, so I definitely recommend it. And then we have Victorian Psycho, and I'm assuming this is supposed to be a play on American Psycho, and this is very much an anti-hero story. So I have not read this one yet, but I'm definitely going to read it this year for sure. I wanted to read it last year, but I didn't have a copy in time, so this year it is. So we have this woman who lives during Victorian times, obviously, and she's a governess. for these snooty rich people, and she doesn't like the kids because they're spoiled brat, and the husband is always leering at her, and the wife notices the husband leering at her, and so she takes it upon herself to punish her for it, even though it's not her fault that her husband's a creep. But it sounds like she has a special Christmas gift in mind, which I'm guessing is probably murdering the entire family, but we'll see. So this is a novella, so very short and easy to fly through, and hopefully a really good one for this year. And then I have a couple of thrillers, starting with Finlay Donovan is Killing It. I don't know if this would be a thriller, actually. It might be more of like a cozy mystery. But anyways, this is about this woman who is a writer, and she goes to a restaurant to talk to her agent, and she writes murder mysteries, and so they're talking about murder, and this woman on a table next to them hears their conversation and for whatever reason assumes that she's actually a hired assassin, and so she wants to hire her to get rid of her husband. And she just so happens to be a single mother and could really use the money, so things happen and things get crazy from there. But this does take place around Christmas time, and there is quite a few references to Christmas, so it's a good one to pick up this time of year. If you haven't read it yet, I know it's very, very popular. Most people have probably already read this one, but if you haven't, it's a good one to pick up. And then we have The Couple at number 9, and this one isn't super Christmassy, just like a tiny little dollop of Christmas, kind of like The Gathering, but it is in there. And so we have this couple who move into this new place, and they start renovating it, only to discover some skeletons, literally skeletons, under the foundation. And so this house is a family-owned house. Her grandmother used to own it, and so it's possible that her grandmother knows about these murders or killings, but she's in a nursing home right now and she has dementia and she can't really remember, and she's a little bit worried that not only does her grandmother know about it, but maybe her grandmother is responsible for it. And then last we have A Killing Cold by Kate Alice Marshall, and I read this one last year and I thought it was pretty good. This is very, very cold and wintry, so it's a perfect time to pick up during the winter months. But we have this woman who's in a relationship with this guy, and things are starting to get serious, and he invites her to go to his family's winter retreat, and she's the first girl that he's brought home to meet his family, which I can totally understand because his family's completely nuts and crazy. And so she gets there and she's trying to win them over, and then she discovers in an abandoned cabin a picture of herself as a child, and she's like, how is this here? How is there a picture of me at this isolated winter cabin retreat of my boyfriends who I didn't even know a year ago, or however long it's been, So this isn't a favorite of mine, but I did enjoy it, so I would still recommend picking it up if you're a fan of thrillers or a fan of Kate Alice Marshall. I said the last one because that is the last Christmassy book that I'm going to talk about, but there is one book that I wanted to mention that takes place around New Year's, so I didn't know whether to put this with my Christmas Rex or my winter Rex, so I'm just going to do it here. But it's called This Time Next Year, and this is a romance, and it's about this woman who feels like she's had bad luck her entire life, and her and this man named Quinn were born on New Year's Eve at the exact same time, but he's the one that won the cash prize for being the first one born in the new year. So maybe it wasn't the exact same time, maybe he was like a minute before her or something, I don't know. And she was actually going to be named Quinn as well, but he was born first, and so he got to be named Quinn. And so she's like, this man has stolen everything from me. And so she goes to this New Year's Eve party, and she meets him at that party and discovers that he's still rich and handsome and has everything going for him, while she's about to lose her apartment and be evicted and lose her job, and life is just not going very well for her. And she keeps bumping into this man that she loathes because she feels like she's unlucky because of him, but slowly but surely starts a romance with him and discovers that maybe there's more to him than what she thought. So that's going to be it for this video. If you liked it, please give me a thumbs up to let me know. Please subscribe to my channel if you feel so inclined. I post every Friday, and I hope to see you in the next one. See ya!